Evcol.
Mr. Whipster by Simon James Collier.
Right, yes. It was summer, very hot, and there was this ice cream van, Mr. Whipster, grubby van, chap never washed it down. Oh, can you imagine the bacteria inside? It doesn't bear thinking about. Anyway, I noticed this a few times before I, did anything. He'd pass by our house on Tilbury Rise and then stop further up the road by the corner of Halstead Close. He'd turn off the bloody song he always played. I think it was Ring a Ring a Roses, but it was so distorted and crackly that you couldn't make head nor tail of what it was. But anyway, he'd stop there and jump over the fence and cut across Mrs. Hilderson's garden. Well, it was more like a wilderness, just like Morgan's nose hair.
Stay on track, Mother.
Right, yes. And he'd knock on the back door. There'd be a few seconds wait, and then she'd come out all made up with her lippy on, and they'd sneak back into the shed, just like ours, asbestos walls and all that. And there'd be some grunting and groaning.
Sorry, how could you tell that? I mean, how could you tell what was going on at Mrs. Hilderson's all the way down at number 147?
You stop interrupting.
Right.
Oh, now you've made me lose my place.
Grunting.
Oh, yes, grunting. I'd been watching, you see, through the net curtains, and I'd seen this happen a couple of times, and it piqued my interest. So when I saw his van drive by, I scooted out and went to see what was going on.
They certainly didn't need neighbourhood watch when you were around, did they?
Your father used to call me his little Jack Russell, like the dog. And once I had a scent, there was no stopping me. Oh, I was tenacious. Anyway, back to the ice cream chap and Mrs. Hilderson.
Yes.
Well, I opened the gate as quietly as I could and nipped up the garden path. Her washing were always out. She never took it in. Don't know why she bothered. It was as dirty after she put it out and left it overnight as what it was when she would put it in the machine. Anyway, it provided me with some cover so no folks could see. And I went up to the shed door and I heard them going at it like there was no tomorrow. Oh, it sounded so steamy. Now, your dad, he were very, physical, which were lovely, but my goodness, listening to them, well, I don't know how to describe it. It was either like rutting deer or he was running a marathon. But I digress. It wasn't that which bothered me after all. It was none of my business. No, but a couple of weeks after, they'd been carrying on, and I had a little titter each time I saw Mr. Whipster trundle up the road. I thought to myself, now he's offering more than a little soft scoop.
Mother.
Oh, stop it. It's making me laugh just remembering. Well, the next day, after I'd seen him, I saw Mrs. Hilderson. She was a widow, and my jaw dropped. She had a shiner, the blackest black eye I'd seen in many a year. I asked her what had happened, and she brushed it off and said she'd opened the back door too quickly and it had caught her unawares. But for some reason, I didn't believe her. So again, 2 days later, I waited for the ice cream van, crept through the garden, and made my way to her shed. Only this time, I looked in, and do you know what I saw?
Oh, the mind boggles.
But it wasn't that. He were hitting her, getting all rough, giving her such a walloping. I didn't know what to do. I had to put my hand over my mouth to stop him from hearing me gasp. I looked again, and she wasn't enjoying herself. I mean, I'm all for a bit of slap and tickle, but this was really rough. So I saw her the next day and asked if she were okay, but she didn't half look pale. She said she were fine, so I thought, best leave it at that. But you know what? I couldn't. What I'd seen just kept on repeating over and over in my head. And I remember when I thought I had to do something about it. I sat bolt upright in bed, almost frightened the life out of your father, but I told him to go back to sleep, and he did. He was a good lad, your dad.
So? What happened?
I followed Mr. Whipster the next day. Now, your dad and me, we had a bit of money saved, and we'd bought a car. A Hillman Minx bottle green. Oh, it was a lovely car, so comfy. And of course we had the caravan at Mablethorpe, so once we had the car, we didn't need to keep on getting the train. It'd make the weekends away much easier. So, now, I was one of the only women on our street who'd learned to drive. People thought me bold, but then that's in my nature. And with your dad's help, I managed to get through my test first time. The instructor were a bit surprised, what with my handling of the vehicle. Bit chauvinistic, if you asked me, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt, just thought he was set in his ways a bit like so. So anyway, I followed Mr. Whipster back to the depot and watched. I did this for a week or so, just so I could get to know his routine. And on the Friday, which was always his late shift, I knew that when he parked up, he was the only one there. He did the locking up, so he trundled into the yard and busied himself with his packing up. They had 4 vans in total. I parked round the back and snuck in through a hole in the fence, which I'd noticed on the Tuesday of that week, and crept round so I could see where he was. I could see him emptying his van, giving it a bit of a wipe down. At least he did that, I thought. But then I saw the state of the rack he was using, and I realised I was being too kind. He was a dirty bugger.
Mum, your language.
He was around the back of the van doing whatever it was he was doing. I'd brought the jack handle from the car. I must have startled him because he jumped up and swung round when he heard me. But before he knew anything, I clunked him on the forehead with the jack. He went down like a lead balloon. The blood went everywhere. I hadn't realised until that point how much blood can come out when you hit your head.
Well, yeah.
Well, he was still murmuring, so I knew he wasn't dead. Now, I'd come prepared, so I was wearing my gardening gloves, and I'd brought some industrial-strength parcel tape with me. I'd popped down to Brainard's the Ironmongers the day previous. I bought the toughest I could get. Told them it were for the pipes. The chap there said it wouldn't do for lagging, but I said to him not to worry. I knew what I needed to do, so I pulled him up to the van. It was a bit of a dead weight, but I managed, to the exhaust, and I opened his mouth. He was really groggy, so he didn't know what was going on, and I pushed his open mouth over the end of the exhaust. I taped his head to the exhaust, used the whole roll. I thought, you're not going to be able to free yourself from that, you little sod. And then I popped into the van, turned on the engine, and then I walked back to him. He were coming round. But that parcel tape, they were right, it were strong. Well, he just couldn't get free. But just in case, I grabbed his hair and held his head so he couldn't move. It took a good 10 minutes for him to choke on those fumes before, he stopped struggling. His body jolted a couple of times, but then that were it. Gone. Well, I scruffed the ground a bit to make sure they would have a bit of a job figuring out the size of the footprints, in the dirt, and then I just left the engine running, and, well, that were that.
And what about the police, the investigation?
Well, they came around and questioned folks on the ice cream route. I was putting out the washing when they came to Tilbury Rise. Nice chap, the policeman, a bit clueless. They asked some questions, but I just told them that Mr. Whipster hadn't been around for a few days, which was a bit surprising, especially as it were warm and he'd be doing a grand trade with his lollies. But I didn't know anything else. I did read in the Evening Post that investigators were looking into the fact that it could be a local turf war, between the ice cream vans. But it went as quiet as a dodo, so to speak.
This was an Evcol Entertainment Clockwork Digital Studios original production. a part of the On Another Wavelength audio anthology series, featuring the voice talents of Maggie Turner and Samantha Boffin. Written, directed and produced by Simon James Collier. Series created and co-produced by Adam Dechanel. Soundscape design, Zachary Elliott-Hatton. Engineer, Callum Mirames. Recorded at Umbrella Sound.